Hi everyone. I thought for a change I'll do a more general Mari tutorial instead of an extension pack specific one. In this tutorial I'm going to cover how to add some more functionalities to the Mari 3 Gizmo system. So stuff that currently does not work inside of the Gizmo system or does not exist yet. So bugs or features. Now it is important to remember I'm currently on Mari 3 v2, so 3.0 v2. And the reason I'm saying this is that if you're watching this video, I don't know, 3 or 4 months from now, some of these bugs might have been fixed, so you don't need to work around them, and some of the features I'm adding manually in might have been added to Mari itself. So it might be worth checking what version you're on and what features have been added, what bugs have been fixed, so you don't have to bother yourself with workflows that might have been obsolete by then. What I'm going to show you is mainly 3 things. The first thing is quite simply, or what should be quite simple, how to get proper naming on your node attributes. I know it sounds incredibly simple, but it can be quite tricky in some cases. Second one is how to add grouping to your exposed node attributes, which is a feature that does currently not exist on Gizmos. And last but not least, we will cover how we can create a system where a single attribute on a Gizmo controls multiple node attributes inside the Gizmo. Right, so let's get into it. I have my quite simple demo network here, and I'm going to create a Gizmo or a graph group from it. And you can do this usually by selecting all your nodes that you want to have as part of your Gizmo, and then do a Control-G or do tab and type group. However, because when I do it this way, Mari will add input nodes to all handles that are unmapped on all the nodes. I would have to manually clean that up. So I'm just going to select all my nodes, Control-C to copy them, and manually create an empty group and paste the nodes in here. Then attach the output. And now if I view this group, nothing should change, so it should be identical to what I've had before. I'm going to name this group, and because I will deliberately break the group to show you some bugs and features, I'm just going to make some copies of this. The first thing you want to do is probably want to expose attributes of nodes that exist inside of the Gizmo to the outside of the Gizmo. For example, if I want to control the cloud node here from the outside of the node, I would go to the group node and choose this little icon in the corner, and which brings me to the group node knobs dialog. Then use the pick and pick the attribute you want to expose, in this case the roughness. And now I have the roughness exposed. And if we look at the cloud node, and down here is my Gizmo, where it changes, the roughness will change in the cloud node and vice versa. Now on a more complex Gizmo, you probably want to have some naming that is representative of what this does inside of the Gizmo. So you go to the group node knobs dialog, pick the attribute you want to rename, and choose the edit and type a new name. Now in its current form, Mari 3 needs this name to be a single word. So we can do roughness underscore 01, and you can see the name change to roughness underscore 01. However, due to a kind of a bug in Mari, if we do a roughness space 01, you'll actually see this attribute disappear. So now this attribute is gone, even though it says roughness 01 in here. And in this form, the Gizmo is already kind of broken, let's face it. You kind of can work around it a little bit, but me personally, I would not keep working with this Gizmo node because it is internally already quite messed up at this point. So I'm just gonna delete this and pick one of my copies that I've made before, and then just redo this and expose the attribute. And I'm just gonna add some other attributes as well. Okay, and let's maybe add these two as well. Okay, so now we want to change this roughness parameter. I'm just gonna go to File, Export Nodes to save this node, or you can go to the node group here and export as Gizmo, which is the same thing really. File, Export Nodes, and let's save this somewhere. And now you need to open the save file in a text editor. You can use any text editor for that, such as WordPad or whatever. I'm going to use a code editor called Sublime Text, which is quite nice for this kind of stuff. Now, before you run away now, what I'm going to show you is actually quite simple. So, and what's more is, on a non-broken Gizmo, the lines that I'm going to say, so for example, here line 8, will always be the same line in every file that you open. That is in a Gizmo that is functional. On a broken Gizmo, these lines might be offset, so you can kind of see immediately if that Gizmo still works or not. Now the first things first, let's go and find our nodes that node attributes that we just exposed. And those attributes are starting in line 41. So you can see here I have all my attributes that I've just exposed. And all these settings are available. Now if we keep scrolling a little bit, we're gonna see something called the attribute name. So to give you a little bit of history, on a regular Mari node, each attribute, so each slider, each dropdown, each checkbox, needs to have a unique name to identify itself. However, this name can be different from what is exposed to the user, which is the pretty name. The attribute name does not support things such as spaces or special characters, while the pretty names do support it. So in these cases of the roughness attribute, if I want to add something with a space, I just go to the pretty name section and then just type in my name with a space without changing the attribute name itself. Now you might have noticed that on some of the attributes I picked, such as the X offset, Y offset, and Z offset, I already get a space for free. And that is because the original attributes that were sitting on this manifold node already had a pretty name defined that was valid, as well as a attribute name that was valid. And you can see this if we go back down here on the attribute name and the pretty name of the offset. So we have an attribute name that does not have a space and a pretty name that does have a space. So Mari, because it already existed on the original node, correctly inherited that system. However, if we were to go back to our group node knobs dialog, pick the X offset, and then go to edit, you will see the name that is displayed here is the attribute name, so that one doesn't have a space. If I would try to mimic now what I already have, so by putting a space in here, this original bug that I showed you would kick in, because Mari would basically add the name I entered here, both to the pretty name as well as the attribute name. So it would put a space in here, which would break the node. But now, because I just modified the pretty name of the roughness, if I save this node, which I already have, and re-import it, file, import, so wrong import, file, import, now I have the roughness of 1 correctly exposed. So I'm pretty sure that they will fix this bug at one point, but at the moment you kind of need to do it the manual way. So it's quite easy to break the Gizmo this way. Right, let's move on. Next thing, you might want to have some grouping of attributes. For example, here we have the roughness being the cloud, or corresponding to the cloud node. Then we have the offset and world scale corresponding to some transform, and the edge and threshold being, the thresholding functions. So we want to kind of group this to make it nicer and more readable for the user, and more easily identifiable. At the moment, Mari 3 does not offer you the option to add grouping of attributes on Gizmos, so we need to do this again the manual way, but it is a quite simple process. So back in our node, we go to line 20, which is this node attributes type, QString list, you're seeing here. And in here, you're seeing all your exposed attribute names. And again, these are the attribute names and not the attribute pretty names. So you can see this again. Here's a quite good example, the clip, which is, if you look in here, this doesn't seem to be any attribute that's called clip. In this case, it's actually called the pretty name of clip. It's actually edge. And again, if we go to the group node knobs dialog, pick the edge and go to edit, you can see here what was originally set as the attribute name. So now I'm gonna add some grouping to it. I'm going to do this simply by adding a /, and before that adding the group name. So for example, on the roughness I add the cloud group name, and then here I'm going to name this group transform. I'm going to copy this over to the world scale as well, and I'm going to name this threshold. Copy this. Just make sure you don't actually rename these attribute names by mistake. And in this case, I will pick the world scale and do some reordering as well. I'm going to move this in front of all the other offsets. So this way you can actually change the order of attributes in here as well. Right. Save this. And keep this around, just never know what happens. Import nodes. And now I have the roughness being under a cloud group, the transforms, the offset and everything being under the transform group, and the thresholding being under the threshold group. So now we have some nice grouping. Now I would recommend that you do the grouping of attributes at the very end. The reason is quite simply that you're kind of losing some of the abilities of reordering attributes inside of Mari. So for example, if we open this up now, and I try to, for example, reorder the offset and move the Y offset above the X offset, if I were to do this now, just watch what happens. It goes up. Well, actually in this case, no, forget it. In this case, it actually might work. Okay, next up, I'm going to show you how to get one attribute on the gizmo to drive multiple nodes inside of the gizmo. So we have two nodes called threshold here, and I want the edge attribute on both threshold nodes to stay perfectly in sync. They always have the same number on them, but I only want the user on the outside of the gizmo to have one slider that controls both. So how do we go about that? There is let's go to our gizmo. I've already exposed one of the edge attributes. Let's move this down. And now I want to expose the one from the threshold 2 node. So you can see here, edge, threshold, edge refers to the edge attribute inside of the threshold node. And now I want to expose the edge attribute from the threshold 2 node. So I'm going to go to pick again, and find the threshold 2 node and select the edge node. And now you would kind of assume that if I click OK, this is gonna expose a second edge attribute. However, remember what I said before, that on each node, you can only have one attribute of each name. Because the thresholding nodes are identical node types, they share the same node names. Attribute names. So the edge attribute internally is named edge on, or clip, as I showed you before, on the threshold, as well as the threshold 2 node. So if I were to click OK now, Mari would basically, the original bug would kick back in that I was showing you, that two nodes with the same name exist. So let's watch what happens. I'm going to add this, and you can see, as I expected, no second edge attribute appeared. So what actually does happen now? Because we have these two edge attributes here that are linked to different nodes, right? Okay, so let's open the threshold and the threshold 2 node, and then just change the edge attribute. And now you can see, due to this bug in Mari, I'm getting control of two different nodes with one slider. Now, this might work for you, but to be honest, if you look what's happening now inside of the node file, personally, I find it a bit dubious, so I rather do this stuff manually, because, for example, if I add another attribute now, it gets quite messy inside of the nodes, you know, it's not really nice. So, for example, if I try to reorder now, you can see now I'm trying to reorder and the reordering doesn't work anymore. I might be wrong again. It still does seem to be doing something. However, this might work for you, but I'm gonna still show you how to do this in a manual way. And in order not to confuse you, I'm just gonna what am I gonna do? I think I'm gonna quickly create a new group note. I really just want to show you exactly what's happening inside of the node file, so you better understand. You can fix anything. So I have a clean group that doesn't have anything exposed, and I'm just gonna pick my edge here. And remember, now if I were to add a second one, it would override it again. So I'm gonna clear up the names, so to speak, and just rename this clip 01. Actually, name this slider 01 just to make it really obvious later on. And now I'm gonna add the second attribute, which is called edge again, and then name this again. It defaults to clip, which is the internal name for this. This is the pretty name. So we name this slider 02. Now I'm just gonna save this out. Go use test2. And let's open this file. Now you can see again, line 20, we have the two attributes that we exposed, slider 01 and slider 02. And then in line 8, we have this attribute link string. And this is a bit of this is kind of the heart of node linking. You can see you have this number, and then the name of the slider, which is called slider 2. Then another number, and an attribute name. So these names here, these complicated numerical and these hash sequences, basically are a unique identifier, a UUID, it's called, to a UI element. In this case, the slider 02. Following that comes another hash, which is an identifier to another UI element that the slider is supposed to affect, which in this case is clip. So we have the slider 02 affecting the clip of the threshold, and the clip has this hash, and the slider 02 has this hash. So if we move a little bit further, then we get the next number, which is the hash of slider 01, and then we get the hash of the node slider, which this one is affecting, which is the clip from the other threshold node. So we want the affected nodes, so threshold 1 and threshold 2, do not change, but we only want the sliders on the exposed sliders on the Gizmo to change. So I only want to have slider 01 control all the threshold nodes. So I'm just gonna select slider 01, including its hash, copy this, and replace slider 02 and its hash in here. Control V, and now I have slider 01 twice in here, linked to different thresholding nodes. Now, because we don't need the slider 02 anymore, I'm going to go to line 20, which lists all the sliders, and then just going to delete this. And just for safekeeping, I'm going to go down here to my line 41 again, which shows the slider 02 as well, and just delete this line as well. Save this, and re-import the node. Test02. Open this up, and now you can see I have one slider. Open up the two thresholds and change the group slider, and you can see both edges are changing. So I have one attribute that is controlling both nodes inside of the Gizmo, and what's more, we've done this in a clean way as opposed to the Mari way that resulted from a bug in Mari. I cannot fully expect that once the naming issues get fixed from the Foundry, that the functionality, if you can call it that, of getting this automatic linking goes away, because I don't think it was intended, it was a bug. But this way we can work around this, we can still add this in manually and have it controlled and not mess up our node. So we kind of get the best of both worlds. Alternatively, maybe the Foundry adds this in as a really functionality that is exposed. Anyway, those are kind of the ways to expand on the Gizmo functionality a little bit. And what's more and what's most important at the stage it's in now, to work around some of the bugs that are not, they're frequent. So it's not quite as well QA'd as it should be. Anyway, I hope you kind of like that, and I hope it wasn't too complicated. Really, there's only 3 lines you need to remember. The line 8, which is the linking of the attributes. We have the line 20, which is the where you add the grouping, and then we have line 41, which is all the pretty names and stuff like that. Okay, that's it. Turned out to be a bit longer. Okay, that's it. Thanks so much.